The sky was painted with streaks of orange and gold as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the quiet village. On the highest hill overlooking the town, a boy stood with a bright red kite clutched tightly in his hands. His name was Arjun, a 12-year-old whose heart held more dreams than his small hands could carry. But this kite wasn't just a toy, it was a memory, a connection to someone he had lost, someone whose absence left a void no words could fill. With a quick flick of his wrist, Arjun let the kite soar. It danced against the evening breeze higher and higher, as if trying to touch the heavens. To anyone passing by, it was just a boy and his kite. But to Arjun, it was something much deeper, an invisible thread tying him to his father, who had made the kite before life took him away too soon. The boy spent hours chasing the wind, imagining his father's voice guiding him, as if every gust carried a piece of him back. But tonight was different. As the kite climbed higher, it wavered against the shifting wind. Arjun's grip tightened, but in one cruel moment, the string snapped. The kite tumbled, spinning wildly, before disappearing into the fading light. Arjun stood frozen, the broken string limp in his hands. His heart raced as he realized the kite was gone, and with it, a part of the only thing that kept his father close. What would he do now? Could he ever find it again? Or was it a sign to let go of something he had held on to for so long? The answer wasn't clear yet, but Arjun's journey had just begun. Arjun couldn't move, his eyes fixed on the empty sky, where the red kite had been only moments ago. His hands trembled as he held the broken string. He tried to tell himself it was just a kite, but deep down, he knew it was much more. That kite carried his father's love, his presence, his voice. Without it, the hilltop suddenly felt colder, quieter, and emptier than ever before. As the night crept in, Arjun walked back home, clutching the string like it was the last piece of his father he could hold on to. His mother noticed the tears brimming in his eyes. She didn't say anything at first, but as they sat together at the kitchen table, she gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You lost it, didn't you?" she asked softly. Arjun nodded, unable to speak. She gave him a sad smile, one filled with understanding. "I know it hurts, but your father wouldn't want you to think everything he gave you is gone. He's still with you, even if the kite isn't." Her words were meant to comfort him, but Arjun wasn't ready to let go. He didn't want memories. He wanted something real, something he could see, touch, and hold. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment the string snapped. Where had the wind carried it? Was it stuck in a tree? Lost forever? A tiny spark of hope flickered within him. Maybe he could find it. The next morning, with the first rays of sunlight peeking through his window, Arjun made up his mind. He would search for the kite. He didn't know where to start, but one thing was certain. He wasn't giving up. Not yet. Arjun's search for the kite began with the hilltop, where the string had slipped from his hands. He scanned the horizon, his eyes darting between the trees and rooftops in the distance. The wind had been strong that evening, carrying the kite far beyond what he could see. Still, he refused to let doubt creep in. His father's words echoed in his mind. Never stop holding on. Even if it meant searching every corner of the village, Arjun was determined to find it. He started with the fields at the base of the hill, asking farmers if they had seen a bright red kite with golden streaks. Some shook their heads, others pointed him further into the village. As he moved from one place to another, Arjun noticed how strangers seemed to care about his search. An old shopkeeper offered him water and encouragement, while a group of kids promised to keep an eye out. It was as if the story of the kite had started to spread, and with it, a strange kind of hope. But not everyone was supportive. On the third day of searching, Arjun ran into a group of older boys near the riverbank. They laughed at his desperation, calling his search pointless. "It's just a kite," one of them sneered. "Get over it." Arjun didn't reply. He couldn't. The knot in his throat tightened, but he clenched his fists and walked away. They didn't understand, and he didn't expect them to, but his resolve only grew stronger. Somewhere out there, the kite was waiting for him, and he wasn't giving up until he brought it back. As Arjun stood on the hilltop, his smile fading into a pensive expression, the wind carried a strange sound, a faint rustling, almost like whispers. He turned, scanning the horizon, but the hill was empty except for the tall grass swaying in the breeze. The sound came again, this time sharper, drawing his attention to the edge of the forest. His chest tightened. He had vowed never to return to that place after retrieving the kite, but something about the sound felt familiar. It wasn't just the wind. It carried a faint echo of his father's voice. Arjun, it seemed to call, faint and distant. His heart raced. Logic told him it wasn't possible, but his feet moved on their own. He glanced back toward the village, hoping to see Mr. Das or someone else nearby, but he was alone. Clutching the memory of his father's words, courage comes in the quiet moments. He stepped closer to the forest. The whispers grew louder as he entered the shade of the trees. Shadows stretched around him, and the air felt cooler, heavier. Arjun followed the sound, his pulse quickening with each step. It led him deeper than he had ever ventured before, past the old gnarled tree where the kite had once hung. He stopped abruptly when he saw it, a small clearing bathed in soft light, and at its center something fluttered, a piece of red fabric. His breath caught. It wasn't the kite. This was something else entirely. As he moved closer, a chill ran down his spine. The fabric was tied to an old wooden box, half buried in the ground, its edges worn but sturdy. Arjun knelt, his fingers trembling as he brushed away the dirt. The whispers ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. What could be inside? And why did it feel like this was meant for him? Days turned into a week, and Arjun's search had taken him across every corner of the village. From rooftops to riverbanks, he looked tirelessly, his heart both hopeful and heavy. Every time he thought he caught a glimpse of something red in the distance, his heart would race, only to sink when it turned out to be a flag or a stray piece of cloth. The villagers continued to offer their help, but Arjun couldn't shake the growing doubt within him. What if the kite had been carried too far? What if it was gone for good? One evening, as the sky began to darken and the air turned cooler, Arjun found himself near the edge of the forest that bordered the village. He hesitated. The forest was dense, and few dared to venture in alone. But as he stood there, something caught his eye. High in the branches of an old gnarled tree just beyond the first line of trees, he saw it, a flash of red, glowing faintly in the fading sunlight. His breath caught. It had to be the kite. It had to be. Without thinking, Arjun ran into the forest, the tall grass brushing against his legs. The shadows grew darker around him, and the tree with the red shape seemed farther than he had thought. The air was thick with the hum of insects, and the rustle of leaves made him feel like he wasn't alone. His heart pounded as he reached the tree and looked up. There it was, the red kite, tangled in the highest branches, but the branches were old and brittle, and climbing them wouldn't be easy. Arjun grabbed the trunk, testing it, his mind racing. How far was he willing to go to bring it back? Arjun and Mr. Das froze, the low growl reverberating through the thick trees. Arjun's heart pounded in his chest as he clutched Mr. Das's arm. From the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes emerged, fixed directly on them. It was a stray dog, its matted fur bristling as it crept closer. The animal looked hungry and cautious, its movements slow but deliberate. Mr. Das stepped forward, shielding Arjun with his body. "Stay calm," he whispered, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. He reached down, grabbed a stick, and waved it toward the dog. "Go! Get out of here!" he shouted. The dog hesitated, growling louder, but after a tense moment, it backed away, disappearing into the underbrush. Arjun let out a shaky breath as relief washed over him. Mr. Das turned to him, his face still pale but calm. "Are you hurt?" he asked, inspecting the boy's leg. "It's just a scrape," Arjun said, trying to sound braver than he felt. His eyes darted to the kite lying a few feet away, its once bright colors dulled by dirt. Despite everything, it was still intact. Mr. Das picked it up and handed it to Arjun. "This kite might be important to you, but your father's legacy isn't in things. It's in the strength and determination you just showed." Arjun stared at the kite, his grip tightening. He nodded slowly, realizing the truth in those words. Just as he was about to thank Mr. Das, the wind picked up, tugging the kite from his hands. It soared upward, caught in the breeze, and danced against the evening sky. For a moment Arjun felt panic, but then he smiled. Watching it fly, He finally understood. His father wasn't tied to the kite. He was always with him. As the kite disappeared into the sky, Arjun stood still, letting the moment sink in. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of losing it. Instead, he felt something else. Freedom, as if the kite's flight mirrored his own journey of letting go. The memories of his father weren't tied to a single object. They were in every lesson, every story, and every moment they had shared. Walking back to the village with Mr. Das, Arjun noticed how quiet the world seemed now. But it wasn't the kind of quiet that felt lonely. It was calm, like a pause before something new. The villagers greeted him warmly, and even the kids who had teased him earlier looked at him differently. He smiled, realizing that his search had brought more than just closure. It had connected him to the people around him. Over the next few days, Arjun returned to the hilltop, not to look for the kite, but to simply feel the breeze, to close his eyes and imagine his father's voice. Each time he climbed that hill, it felt less like a place of loss and more like a place of connection. Mr. Das became a frequent companion, sharing his own stories of resilience and teaching Arjun the value of moving forward without forgetting. In the end, the kite wasn't about holding on or letting go. It was about what it symbolized: the love of a father, the courage to chase dreams, and the strength to find meaning even in loss. As Arjun stood on the hill one last time, watching the horizon light up with the evening sun, he smiled. His father's spirit was with him, not in the kite, but in his heart where it had always been.